What's up, everybody? In this video, we're going to continue programming the address book that we started on the last video. We basically programmed all of the functionality for the address book, but the only thing missing is that when we exit the address book and restart the program, our contact list is not being saved out. So basically, we're losing all the information we type in because the program is not saving a file out to store that information. So we can fix this pretty easily by saving out a file of everyone in our contact list. There's different ways to save out files. A common way is to just save out a plain text file that you can open up and look at and edit, just like a normal text file you would edit in WordPad or something like that. But for more complicated scenarios, people like to use XML. And feel free to Google XML for a proper textbook definition. But basically, XML is just a way of encoding files. And there's a nice part of XML called serialization. And serialization basically will take a bunch of data and automatically order it and save it out for us without much work on our end. So it's super nice. And we are going to use XML today. And I'm hoping to set this up in a way where you guys can reuse this code for any future project that you use, okay? The code that we write today will be super reusable, and it's just two basic classes, nothing too crazy. The first class that we need to write is called SaveFile, and basically you can envision SaveFile as literally being the file that we save out. So anything that's inside of this SaveFile class is the information that we want to save. So in our case, there's only one piece of information we need to save from the address book, and that's our contact list. So savefile.cs would have one list of people that we want to save out. But say you're working on a game in the future and there's 3 or 4 different pieces of information you want to save out. Savefile.cs could have 4 different lists, one of them being all of the players in your game, another one being all the images in your level, so on and so forth, okay? So anything in savefile.cs is what we want to save out. Let's go ahead and make this class. I'm going to right-click my project name. I named my project Address Book. You could have named yours something else. And then I'm going to go to Add Class. And then here I'm going to name it SaveFile.cs. Click Add. And C# has generated a basic class for us. The first thing we need to do is make this class public because we want everyone to have access to the save file. And then, like I said earlier, we only have one piece of information we want to save out, and that is our list of people. So we're going to make a variable called people, that's a list of people, and similar to how we were making properties in the last video, we're going to give it a get and set. And basically that's just to make XML happy because it needs that to automatically serialize everything. So let's go ahead and write that. I'm going to make a public list of persons. I'm going to call this people. Okay? And whenever you have a get keyword like this, you can specify specific things that you want to return. Like in the last video, we made that name property. We returned another variable called name. And then the set keyword here, basically you can write certain functionality inside of a set to assign this variable. So maybe there's a specific calculation that you want. You don't just want to add a person to the list. Maybe you want to add a person and make some tweaks to their variables before you add it. You could do all of that inside of a set bracket like this, okay? So this is basically all we need. Like I said, this is pretty simple. But in the future, like I said, if you have more things you want to save out in your save file, feel free to expand this class and add more things. Now we need to make our final class, and we're going to call this one XML Helper. And this will contain a load and save function for us to save and load our XML file. So let's go ahead and make this new class. I'm going to call it XMLHelper.cs. First things first, let's make this class public. And we will need to add another using statement up here at the top. And using statements are basically a way for us to import other people's code. So you see this system.link using statement here. This is a library of code that contains the list class that we've used in the past. Okay? Basically, whenever you want to use other people's code inside of classes, you will need to specify that up here and say, hey, I want to use this library of code. And since we're wanting to write a XML file and serialize an XML file, we will need to use a specific library for that called system.xml.serialization. And this will give us access to specific classes that we need, like the XML serializer. Let's go back down to the class, and here we can write the save and load functions that we need. Let's make a public static save file called load, and it will take in a string file name. And whenever you use the keyword static, that just means that this is always in memory. We won't have to make a new instance of the XML helper class. We can just call XML helper.load whenever we want, okay? Because when something is static, it's always in memory. We don't have to create a new instance of it. It will return a save file class. Remember, the save file class is what we just wrote, so it'll return a filled out instance of that class. And in here, inside of the function, we need to write 4 or 5 lines of code. And I'm going to give a brief explanation of what this stuff does, but what I'm going to say is, if you would Google how to serialize an XML file, you'll get some basic sample code. That's what we're writing here. Don't stress too much about trying to learn every aspect of this, because you're probably just going to write this one time today and then just reuse these functions whenever you need to save or load an XML file. Okay, so don't worry about it too much. But the first thing we need to do is create an instance of an XML serializer. Let's call this serializer equals new serializer. And then in here we need to specify what exactly we're trying to save out. And we're trying to save out a save file class, so we'll say type of save file. And that's just telling the serializer that we are trying to save a type of save file, okay? Next, we need an instance of a class called TextReader. Oh, and actually, TextReader, to access this class, this is in a different library. So let's go back up here to using, and we're going to say using.system.io, because the TextReader is inside of that library. Sorry, I forgot about that. Okay, and notice that as soon as we type system.io up here, this turns green because it's found that class. Alright, and we will say reader equals new stream reader, and then we will pass in file name as the parameter we set there. Alright. Finally, we need to make an instance of our save file class. I'm going to call this save file obj for object equals a save file cast serializer dot deserialize reader. So basically, the serializer.deserialize function is reading in the file that we've specified. So file name is the name of the file we're trying to load. The serializer will deserialize or read that file, and we are casting that file back into a save file object type, okay? And that has all the information that we need, which in our case is only the list of people. After this, we can close the reader and return the instance of save file that has all the information loaded from our file. So basically all this is doing is it's saying, hey, I want to load in this file called file name. Maybe that's called people.xml or something. It's whatever we name it. And then XML serializer and this text reader will work together to read the file that we've specified and then decode the XML back into a save file object type. Okay? Now we just have one more function to write called public static void save. Okay, and once again, this is a static function, so we'll have access to this function anywhere in code. We won't have to create a new instance of XML helper to access this. The little brackets here, if you remember back to when we work with lists, remember a list can be any type of data that we specify, and we specify that by using brackets. Remember, we can have a list of ints, a list of strings, so on and so forth. The same concept is going on here. We can save different types of data out. So we are just putting this T here to signify kind of an abstraction that this can be any type of data, okay? So whatever type of data that we pass in to save, in our case it'll be a save file, okay? And then the second parameter here is called file name, and that's what we want to literally call the file we save out. So maybe we want to call it people.xml or savedata.xml, whatever we want to call it. And then, like I said, the first parameter is the actual data we're saving out. Here inside of the function, we need to make an instance of text writer instead of text reader, right? This time we're writing data out. And text writer will be a new stream writer, and we'll pass in the file name that we want to call it. Now we need to use the XML serializer again, but this time instead of deserializing and reading XML in, we want to serialize the data and save the XML out, okay? So let's make an XML serializer, and we'll call it serializer like last time. Okay? And then this looks similar to last time. We're saying this is a type of T. So in our case, this will be a save file. But whenever we abstract this like this, we can save out different types of things. Now, last but not least, we need to serialize this data. We'll pass in the writer, because that is the stream that we've opened to write something with. And then for the last thing here, we will pass in obj, which is the data we want to save out. We will close the stream by saying writer.close, and that is it. So like I said, maybe you're like, wow, this makes no sense. This is a lot of code I've never seen before. But basically, you know, it's pretty straightforward, and like I said, you'll never probably have to mess with this again because it's pretty reusable. But basically, yeah, it's just all it's doing is saving out the data that we want to pass in here, and then up here we pass in whatever we name the file to load, and it just decodes the XML into a save file and returns that save file for us to use in our C# code. Okay, let's go back to our form1.cs, and now we need to use the XML helper class and the save file class to actually load and save our list of people. Let's go down to the very bottom and make a couple new functions. The first one is called save file. Let's make it a private void save file. And we will use a new couple of keywords here called try and catch. And basically, anything that we put inside of a try bracket will be code that we try to execute, but if it crashes, we will nicely exit it and go into the catch bracket. This is a way of error checking, but you want to use these very sparingly because they are super intensive on the hardware. They're very slow to execute. But I find that you always want to use these whenever you're doing saving or loading of files, because a lot of times there'll be other programs running like virus scanners, and they might see you saving out a new file and want to scan it while you're in the middle of saving the file, and then that crashes your program. So there's all these things that you can't necessarily account for. It's very easy code to have problems with. So it's a good idea to wrap all of your file input and output code with try-catch brackets. So let's do that now. We're going to try to save out a file. So we'll say save file equals new save file. Alright, and basically all this is doing is making a new instance of our save file class, and now we need to fill out this save file with the information we want to save. So for us, that is savefile.people, and we need to set this list of people to the list in our list box. And to do that, we can say listbox1.items. And remember, our listbox list is a list of objects, and that's a very generic class. Literally everything is an object that's on our form, and we're trying to save out a specific list of people, so we need to cast this list of objects into a list of people. Alright, so to do that, we can say cast bracket person parentheses open and close to list. And all this is doing is taking our list in the list box and casting it or converting it into a list of people. Last but not least, we can call xmlhelper.save, and notice all I had to do was type the name of the class and then dot, and I get access to those static functions. That's because those functions are static. Okay? If they were not static, we'd have to create a new instance of XML helper to get access to those functions. Here we can pass in our save file because that's the data that we want to save out, and let's call this file info.mic. And basically, MIC is the file extension that we want to assign this. Internally, it's an XML file. Anything we save out here is XML. But if you want to be fancy and make up a file extension, feel free to go ahead and do that. I think it's kind of fun. And then outside of the try bracket, we'll do our catch. And this is what will be called if there's any type of problem saving our file. So if our program crashes or runs into a critical error while saving out this file, it will immediately exit the try bracket and go into the catch bracket and prevent our program from really crashing. So in here we can do some error checking to see what exactly the error is. Here in the catch we can put parentheses exception EX, and C# will give us an exception of what went wrong inside of that try bracket, and we can display that to the user by saying messagebox.show error saving the contact list, and then plus the exception to string. So this will show the user the error of what exactly went wrong, and maybe they could send that error to us, the developer, so we can see what's wrong to fix it. So this function should now be complete. We need to write one more function called private void load file. And here we will do another try catch. And inside of the try, we will make a new save file. Oops. And we will set the save file to xmlhelper.load info, oops, quotation mark there, info.mic. And whatever you named the file earlier up here, make sure that this is exactly what you're passing in here, otherwise it won't load your file properly. So this save file will be filled out with all the information from the file we saved out earlier. Now we just need to update our list box on our C# form to have all of these people that we loaded in from the XML file. So we can just say for int I equals 0 for as long as I is less than save file dot people dot count, I++. So we're going to iterate through every single person in the save files people list, and we're going to add all of the people from the file into our listbox1 items list. So we'll call items.add. And then all we need to do here is just add save file.people at sub I. And let's go ahead and add the catch block down here. We'll leave this empty, but still this is code that could blow up in our face, so we need the try catch just to make sure our program doesn't crash. Let's go ahead and call these functions. We want to call the load file function as soon as our program starts. So up here in the form1 constructor, we can call load file right before we check for the birthdays. So let's say load file. And let's call save file at the end of our save button click function. So right here, we'll update the display member and then call save file to save out our file with all of the correct up-to-date information. So at this point, our application should run as intended. Let's press F5. And I'm going to make a new person called Michael Hicks, fake at fake.com, White House, Washington, D.C., LOL. And I'll make the birthday, my real birthday, January 3rd, 1993. And for notes, I am a really cool person. I'm going to hit save, and then I'm going to make one more new person called John Doe, fake at fakey.com, save, and exit out. Now we should be able to press F5 one more time, and all that information I just wrote should be saved out in a file, and upon startup we'll load in that file and have all the information saved from last time. Let's press F5. John Doe is 0 today, so looks like something's working. Yep, there we go. Michael Hicks has all of his information, and John Doe has all of his information. Awesome. I want to show you guys one other thing about saving out files. If you notice down here where we typed in info.mic, you can also type in a more direct path like C desktop, right? Like more of a typical kind of address there. But when you just type in the file name and an extension, it will just save this file right next to the executable file of your program. So I want to show you guys where this executable file is stored. If you open up Windows Explorer, go to your Documents, and then scroll down to Visual Studio 2017, or whatever version you have installed, and then go to Projects, and then find the name of your project. Mine is Address Book. Go into Address Book again, and then here in the bin folder, this is where Visual Studio keeps all of the files when it compiles your program. So there's a debug folder and a release folder. The release folder is for the final version of your application, but we've always been running our programs in debug mode. So if you go into debug, you'll find right here is addressbook.exe, and then below at the bottom here is info.mic, which is the file we saved out. If you want to share any program that you write with other people, you should compile the program in release mode. Because when you're in debug mode, Visual Studio creates some extra stuff that it includes with your application that's meant for debugging in Visual Studio. So when you compile a release version, it takes all that stuff away and makes the file sizes smaller and more concise. So let's go back to Visual Studio, and up here, notice there's the Start button, and then over to the left is Any CPU, and then one more is Debug. If you click that, you'll see a drop-down menu, and here you can choose Release. If you press F5 again, it will compile the release version of your project, see? And now if we go back to the release folder in the bin folder, here is the final version of your program that you can share with your friends. So you'd want to share addressbook.exe, this first file right here. And then when they start to make contacts, they will get a save file spit out right next to this executable file. So that's it, guys. Good job. This is the last big project that we'll make in this series. I do have a few more videos after this, but we're going to start wrapping things up for this Intro to Programming video series. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next video.